the forgotten Earth, humanity's last secret. The sky was shrouded in dense clouds, while a metallic sound echoed faintly in the distance. Captain Alex slowly opened his eyes, feeling the weight of his recent crash. The visor of his helmet was cracked, the spacecraft destroyed a few meters away, and the air around him seemed to pulsate with an eerie energy. He didn't know where he was, but one thing was clear. This was not the place he had expected. How does one survive when everything feels lost? And what if the world you've landed on is not what it seems? Still dazed, Alex checked his equipment, trying to process what had happened. This is Captain Alex of Mission TR-22. I've experienced a system failure during atmospheric entry. Immediate assistance required. He waited, but only the sound of the wind replied. There was no communication, only an absolute, unnerving silence. Replaying the events in his mind, Alex remembered the last command he had received before losing consciousness, to cross the interstellar portal and explore a supposedly habitable planet 20 light-years from Earth. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. His map displayed familiar coordinates, even though the alien surroundings contradicted it. As he walked among the wreckage, Alex noticed tracks on the ground that didn't belong to his ship. They were mechanical, fresh, and didn't make sense on a planet that, according to reports, had no intelligent life. Narrowing his eyes, he muttered, This can't be right," while distant thunder heralded an incoming storm. This was just the beginning of a mystery that would force him to confront not only his present, but also a future he had never wished to face. The wind howled louder, lifting dust and small stones as Alex trudged forward. He needed to leave the crash site before the electric storm engulfed the area. His trembling hands clutched the communication device, searching for a signal, but the words on the screen were disheartening. Connection interrupted. Hours passed as he walked, until he finally reached a shallow valley. Descending cautiously over uneven terrain, he found something that shouldn't have been there, a metallic structure, partially buried in the ground, with inscriptions that looked familiar, yet completely out of place. He approached it, trying to decipher the symbols. It was as if someone had built it long ago, using technology far beyond human capabilities of his era. Then he heard it, a metallic click from behind. Alex turned swiftly, wielding his multi-tool as a makeshift weapon. In the growing darkness, two figures emerged at the crest of the valley. They were humanoid, but their eyes glowed with an intense blue light. They were robots, and they didn't look friendly. Without hesitation, Alex began to run. The robots gave chase, emitting sharp, metallic sounds that pierced the valley's silence. He tripped on an exposed root and tumbled down the slope, but managed to get up and hide behind a large rock. His breathing was shallow as he adjusted his helmet's visor to improve his night vision. The robots passed by, oblivious to his presence, but Alex knew his time was running out. He needed to regroup, understand the situation, and most importantly, find a way off this planet. He grabbed the communicator again and sent an emergency message. "This is Captain Alex. I'm being pursued by unidentified mechanical units. Confirm the situation, please. Respond." The device blinked, offering no reply. A small glint caught his eye. A piece of shiny metal lay on the ground, bearing the same inscriptions as the structure he had found earlier. He picked it up, realizing it might be part of a larger system. But where was the rest of it? Alex sighed, rubbing his temple as he tried to think. He didn't know where he was, but he was beginning to suspect this wasn't the uninhabited planet described in his mission briefing. Something had gone terribly wrong, and he was at the center of it all. Alex kept walking, though the weight of fear pressed heavily on his shoulders. The landscape was oppressive, gray hills, dead trees whose gnarled branches stretched like skeletal fingers. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the occasional creak of wind brushing past pieces of metal scattered across the ground, like forgotten remnants of an ancient war. Sweat trickled down his face inside the helmet, despite the rising chill. There was something about this place, something that made his skin crawl. The ground beneath his boots seemed to thrum faintly, a phenomenon he tried to ignore for the sake of his sanity. There was no room for paranoia or superstition. He needed answers, not fear. As he reached a clearing, a low, angular building, partially swallowed by the earth, came into view. It was a momentary relief, shelter, perhaps even answers. Yet something about the structure made him pause. He couldn't pinpoint it, but he felt as though he wasn't alone. The sensation was as tangible as the cold and the ache in his injured hand. "It's just your mind playing tricks," he muttered to himself, forcing the unease aside. He advanced cautiously, clutching his communicator like a talisman. Inside, the building resembled a laboratory, but everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, like filthy snow. Broken equipment, yellowed papers, and mechanical tracks on the floor told a silent story of chaos and abandonment. As he searched a table, he found a small device bearing the same markings as before. "Who made this?" he said aloud, but the empty room gave no answer. A sharp noise jolted him. A door at the back of the room had creaked open, and Alex froze. The corridor beyond yawned like a throat of shadow, oppressive and unwelcoming. He clutched the device tighter, knowing it was useless as a weapon, but unwilling to let it go. With hesitant steps, he moved into the dark hall. Every step made the floor groan, and his breathing sounded unnaturally loud. Then, he heard it. Not the metallic clanking of before, but something softer, almost human, emanating from somewhere ahead. It was a low, repetitive whisper, like a machine trying to speak. He stopped, swallowing hard, and took another step, closer to a faint blue glow coming from a room at the end of the hall. Inside, a monitor blinked with an ominous message: "Synchronization error, 5 years early." "Early? What does that mean?" he whispered, his voice trembling. That was when he saw them. Old yellowed newspapers pinned to the wall next to the monitor, their headlines spelling humanity's downfall. Global social collapse, rise of the machines, and finally, Earth's last transmission, year 2475. Alex felt his knees weaken. He looked at the device in his hand and back at the dates flashing on the screen. The realization hit him like a blow. He wasn't on an alien planet. He was on Earth, and it was already dead. The wind outside seemed to have died down, leaving Alex alone with the oppressive silence of the laboratory. The flashing message on the monitor seemed to mock him. Synchronization error, 5 years early. His mind raced. How could this be possible? Was his entire mission a lie? Had he traveled not across space, but through time? And if so, why? As he scanned the room, his eyes landed on another screen in the corner. It displayed something different. A message blinking with cold, mechanical precision. VELUM Protocol activated. Full synchronization in 72 hours. VELUM? What the hell is VELUM? Alex muttered, his voice shaking. None of the mission briefings mentioned this. He stepped closer, hesitant, as though proximity alone might reveal answers. Instead, the screen flickered and a recording played. An older scientist appeared on the screen, his face lined with exhaustion and panic. He spoke rapidly, his voice thick with dread. The VELUM Protocol was activated as a last-ditch effort to preserve human consciousness. But something went wrong. It didn't just store the data of human minds. It brought something else through. Something that should never have crossed into our reality. The recording cut off abruptly, leaving Alex frozen in place. He stared at the screen, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Something else?" he whispered. His throat tightened as dread clawed at the edges of his mind. He turned, his eyes scanning the room for clues. A faint light glimmered in the center of the laboratory. A cylindrical glass pod, partially obscured by dust. Alex approached cautiously, wiping the surface with his sleeve. His breath caught as he peered inside. Suspended within was a human figure. No, not just human. Something more. Its skin appeared preserved, its veins faintly pulsing with a strange, unnatural rhythm. The figure's half-open eyes seemed to watch him, even though they couldn't possibly be alive. Alex stumbled back as another screen near the pod flickered to life. Identity confirmed, Commander Epsilon. VELUM Protocol, manual release required. "Commander Epsilon," Alex echoed, his voice barely audible. Who was this person, and why were they so deeply tied to this mission? Suddenly, a deep guttural sound filled the room, not originating from any one place, but vibrating through the air itself. Alex turned, his heart pounding. The robots from earlier appeared at the doorway, moving erratically, their lights flickering. One stepped forward, projecting a hologram into the room. The hologram displayed a map, Earth's surface, barren and cratered, with a blinking marker showing Alex's location. Above it, a final message appeared. VELUM Protocol must not be interrupted. Choose activate, or deactivate. His breath caught. This was the crux of his mission, a decision that could reshape whatever remained of Earth. But how could he make such a choice with so little information? He turned back to the pod, where Commander Epsilon's lifeless form waited, shrouded in mystery. The low hum in the air grew louder. Alex felt the ground tremble, as though the planet itself was reacting to his hesitation. Script 19, Part 5. The room was vibrating now, the walls pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. Alex stared at the glowing options on the hologram. Activate or deactivate. His fingers hovered, trembling. But before he could act, the glass pod began to hiss. Slowly, it opened, releasing a cold mist that curled around his feet. Inside, Commander Epsilon stirred. The figure wasn't just preserved, it was alive. Its head turned toward Alex, and its eyes, entirely black, locked onto his. When it spoke, it wasn't with a voice, but with an echo that resounded directly in Alex's mind. I am what remains, and what will be. Alex stumbled backward, his knees almost buckling. The dark guttural hum from earlier grew louder, and in the corner of the room, the shadows began to twist and ripple. They grew, coalescing into a form that defied description. A vortex of shifting, alien shapes, neither solid nor ethereal. The sight of it made Alex's mind ache, as though the mere act of perceiving it violated some unspoken law of reality. VELUM? It's not a system, Alex whispered, his voice breaking. It's a portal. The realization hit him like a freight train. The VELUM Protocol hadn't just preserved humanity, it had torn a hole in existence, connecting Earth to something beyond comprehension. And whatever had come through was not benevolent. The hologram flickered, demanding a choice. The robots stood motionless, their flickering lights casting erratic shadows on the walls. Alex's breath quickened as he glanced between the pod, the encroaching entity, and the blinking options. Finally, with a desperate shout, he slammed his hand onto one of the options. The room was engulfed in a blinding light, followed by a deafening silence. When Alex opened his eyes, he was no longer in the laboratory. He stood in a vast, featureless void, the sky an endless abyss of swirling colors that defied reason. Around him floated beings, amorphous, shifting forms that seemed to watch him without eyes. A voice echoed in his mind, soft yet overwhelming, like the whisper of a tidal wave. Welcome, traveler. You have seen, but there is more to see. Alex tried to scream, but no sound came out. And so he discovered that the true terror was not what Earth had become, but what it had unleashed. The screen fades to black, with one final line appearing. The VELUM Protocol has been activated. The meaning of the acronym appears below. VELUM, Void Entity Link for Universal Manipulation.